I appreciate you hopping on today, nearing 170 episodes, and I must say this is one of the ones I'm most excited for because it's so unique and nothing against some of the other areas, but the betting and the NIL, it's like it's great, but there's so many of them. This one certainly hits a sweet spot of something we haven't touched on yet. So yeah, thanks for coming on, and excited to dive in.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited and looking forward to the conversation.
So give us a little bit, who you are, what you're doing, and the ISC high level, and then we'll start to break it
Yeah.
down and go into all the cool things you guys got going. There's a ton of events slated for this new hub of sports, Indianapolis. Love it or hate it, there's a lot more coming there.
Oh, thank you. My name is Patrick Talty. I'm president of Indiana Sports Corp. I'm a Hoosier by choice. I actually started my career here in Indianapolis at the RCA Dome, building that doesn't exist anymore. A lot of people don't even realize there wasn't a building before Lucas Oil Stadium. I've lived around the world, worked a lot of different places, and have been chasing events and being in sports for my whole career, now going on 30 years, and came back to Indiana in 2019 to the Sports Corp. And the Sports Corp was founded in 1979. It was the first sports commission in the country, and now there's over 350 of them across the U.S., all competing against each other for these events to use sports as an economic driver. And sports, Indiana really kind of pioneered that, and so the Sports Corp is an influence in the city. It's really shaped what we are as a city. Our sports strategy has really helped us become who we are. It's driven the tourism industry. The tourism industry has driven our sports industry. I mean, we landed the NCAA in 1999, so they just celebrated 25 years being headquartered here in Indianapolis. We're the home of USA Track and Field, USA Gymnastics, and USA Football. And, we're super proud of all the events that we've hosted: Super Bowls, Final Fours, NBA All-Star games, and CFP championships. And we've hosted over 500 international and national events since 1979, equaling $4 billion of economic impact to the state of Indiana. And so we think this humble Midwestern city is really, has, made itself a sports hub. And we continue to just push forward and lean into that. And we continue to work hard to keep on that legacy and get even better and do more.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I know even this isn't directly affiliated with you, but it's coming downstream a little bit too. You got Techstars there doing some cool stuff with startups. You have, I don't know if they're calling it IU Ventures or Hoosier Ventures, but they have their sort of development arm. So you have a lot now. You're seeing you guys set the standard, and now it's able to trickle down a little bit. But I want to go a little bit deeper on the commission side.
Yeah.
You said you were the first one, obviously the ISC 1979. What exactly are these commissions? How do they operate? What do they look like? Where do they sit between the sports and obviously the politics and the cities and everything in between? I'd like to just understand those a little bit better.
Yeah, sports commissions were really founded, and the idea is to go after sporting events, to have them hosted in your city in order to use them as an economic driver. So our job, to make it easy, is we go out and we represent our city and our state to rights holders and events holders and say, you should come to Indiana and in Indianapolis because we are the best place to host your event. And then we have to actually then bid on these events that come out. So like if you were working on a Super Bowl, you'd put the Super Bowl bid together. If you're working on Final Four, you'd put it together, and you would tell that story of why Indiana and Indianapolis is the best place to host the city or host the event. So you would talk about the venues that you have. You would talk about our connected walkable downtown. We would talk about the Hoosier hospitality. We would, and we'd get into the technical aspects of like how many hotel rooms we have and how that, what level they are and what meeting rooms we have and, what's the weather like and how many flights inbound do we have and how many direct flights. You'd go all that technical stuff, but then you would tell the story of the things that make you different and unique. And I think the things that make us different and unique in Indiana and Indianapolis is, one, we can come together and work no matter what side of the aisle we're from, no matter what socioeconomics we have. We always come together as a community to put on these major events and to do these great things. And then I think the other thing is our connected walkable campus. We have our basketball arena is close to our football stadium, which is all connected to our convention center, and all the hotels are connected to that. So you drive in from the airport, you park your car, and you never have to use it again, which rights holders and people attending events absolutely love. And then the last thing is Hoosier hospitality. It's real. It is not just a thing that we say. We will out welcome anybody in the world, and people care, and they want almost competitively want to make sure that they are more welcoming and more hospitable than anyone else in the country.
It's definitely, we mentioned it before, but that central location too probably makes
Yes.
it nice. I'm curious, any other cities that you've seen take an emerging stance or, do a nice job? It seems like Phoenix might be one that there's been a lot, but any you look at and go, yeah, they're doing a good job too alongside Indy.
Oh yeah, I mean, we talk about the competition all the time now, and San Antonio does a great job, and San Antonio is a lot like us, where it's a walkable, beautiful weather. They have the river walk. The Final Four is going to be there this year, and they always do a really nice job. But as you said, like Phoenix is really coming along, and is that being seen as an event city? I mean, we would never 10 years ago have talked about Las Vegas as being an event city. They sports was not a thing that they hosted, and now they're hosting all kinds of events, and Nashville is up and coming, and Chicago wants to build a new stadium to compete with those events, and then Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, you can't ever forget them. And I worked in Minneapolis for a time, managing the NFL stadium there, and they're a good event city. So there's all those. We keep tabs on all of them, and as the industry, yes, we compete hard for these events. And we work really hard to beat out the other cities, but we do come together and we talk and we share, and we're very cordial, and we help each other out where we can, because a city can't host every event every year. So it's really important that these rights holders have success every single year wherever they go. So we do work together some and help each other out. But there are a lot of great cities doing a lot of great things, and we go to the cities and watch the events, and we attend them to see what we can learn and what can we take, just as much as they come and see us. Like when we hosted the Olympic swimming trials, Minneapolis was here, Detroit was here, St. Louis was here, all taking in what we were doing. And I'm sure they'll go back and they'll take some of those learnings and implement them. Just like when we were in Phoenix, we took a ton of notes. We had a team out there, watched what they were doing, hosting the Final Four. And we have some things that we're talking about doing now were things that we learned in Phoenix and said, they did a really nice job with that. We should implement that.
Another cool one you did this past year was the Olympic trials of swimming you did at the NFL stadium. Curious, do you see more of this now where we're starting to cross sports into other facilities, or facilities being built more for multi-purpose, or what's that landscape looking like?
I mean, I think facilities need to be multi-purpose because they're such a capital investment, and to keep them busy and keep them working for the city, you have to have them be multi-purpose. And Lucas Oil Stadium was built multi-purpose. It was built thinking about basketball. It was built thinking about other events. I mean, it hosts a ton of conventions, and it's connected directly to the convention center. So it really lays out well, and it fits for all kinds of different events. So I do think that you're going to see more and more of these events thinking like this. I mean, that swimming trials is a perfect example of how we in Indianapolis always think about, how do we take an event and how do we raise it up? How do we change it from when it was here to when it leaves? It's a different event. It's hosted different. It's thought about differently. And swimming was definitely that. First time ever in an NFL football stadium. Broke 2 world records for attendance, not once, but twice, on opening night and again on Wednesday, with 22,000 people attending a single swim meet. Largest swim meet before that was 16,000. And then 285,000 people came over the 9 nights. That was 60% more people than had attended in Omaha. And you just think about what that means for the access of the sport to the casual fan and to the fan to be inspired. That right there, for a national governing body to be able to grow their sport, to have that type of big influx of people being open to it, that's huge. And so I do think you'll see more people thinking about these type of things. Like, how do we take a bigger swing and think about it on its biggest scale?
And then heading into World Cup 26, obviously Olympics is more LA based, or it's probably all LA based or pretty close to it. Anything on that from now, not just on national scale, but from a global scale or global events? What's the stance, or how you guys view that? Because I don't know if you were doing anything in the World Cup, but it seemed natural to.
Yeah, we actually, interesting story. We actually are not in the World Cup, and we purposely did that because we are hosting the Final Four in 26. And so we chose to, host the NCAA Final Four, and they wanted to go to a city that was going to be focused on them and not have the World Cup, and that's a really hard drain on a city. I mean, you have to, it's capital intensive, volunteers, a lot of work. Talking to my other friends in the industry that across these other cities that are hosting it, it's a big lift, and it's going to be awesome though to have the global stage on the U.S. And we're hopeful that we can host a team here as a base camp in Indy at one of our Grant Park up in a suburb of Indianapolis, and capitalize on that. And we think that it's just going to help grow the global sport of soccer. LA 28 is interesting. We are definitely focused on trials for 28 because I do think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity where the Olympic movement is going to be people are going to be excited about it. They're going to be rejuvenated. It's a hometown games. People are going to be talking about it. They're going to start talking about it sooner. So I think trials coming through Indy, we definitely want LA to run through Indy in some form or fashion. We haven't figured out what those trials are. We think we put a really good resume forward for swimming to come back by setting all those records. So we'll hopefully maybe we can get swimming, maybe it's gymnastics, just thinking of all the different sports that could come and be that. We definitely are thinking about international events because I do think as the world is getting somewhat smaller in terms of, how we communicate and how we think about sports, and, you have investments from international coming into the United States. You have the United States investing in like the premiership and all those different, the world is getting a little smaller. So we want to make sure that we're thinking globally. How do we make sure that we're not just thinking of U.S. events, but how do we think about global events? So we attend conferences internationally. We attend events internationally, and we think about those events. I mean, one of the ones that, we've early on tagged is, the Rugby World Cup. Can the Women's Rugby World Cup be a site here in Indianapolis? We think so. We think we have a very strong rugby community. We're talking about putting in some facilities that have rugby first influence. So, we're thinking about that. So it definitely is something that we think about here in Indy because we have a big net and throw all those events internationally into this net, and then we start to evaluate them. And then when they come out, it's the very bottom of the funnel. And then, we'll bid on, 2 or 3 of those events. But, we want to throw in as much as we possibly can to evaluate.
Yeah, and you beat me to the punch. I was going to go into the emerging sports next, and you brought up the rugby. How do you think about the crickets and even the padels, or we talked about soccer, or football, or whatever people want to call it, on the emerging side? How do you think about some of those that are newer? Their fan bases aren't as large yet, but you have a potential to set Indy as a standard for these new, up and coming sports.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that you have to be thinking about when you're looking at these sports is everyone would say, oh, they're not ready for it right now. The question though is how do you make sure that you're on the front edge so that when it is ready, it's exactly like you said, you've already set the standard, you've already built a relationship, people already know you. Because if you wait till it becomes big, then you're late, and you're going to miss that moment to be able to capitalize on that. I think rugby is one of those things. I think cricket is starting to get that way. I think you have to start building those relationships and understanding the sport. I luckily was blessed to work overseas in the Middle East for 3 years, and so I got to see rugby firsthand. I got to see cricket firsthand. I got to see football at the global stage, the highest. And so you begin to understand and realize that the sports world is so much bigger than just the U.S. And so you have to be ready for those moments. And so we do think about that. Like these emerging sports, we talk about them, we watch them, and it may not be something that we look to host a national championship, but like our rugby facility that some businessmen are investing in, and they're building here in Indianapolis. They're taking an older stadium and renovating it and turning it into a rugby first stadium that will be a community asset as well. We've talked a lot to them about how do we make sure that we're hosting small events? How do we make sure we continue to grow that community so that when that moment is right to harness it and jump on a national bid or an international bid, we're ready and we already have a head start.
Go into sort of the call it the revenue or the business matrix.
Sure.
Like, give us the layout of how money flows. How's the ISC? What's that business model versus the actual stadiums or events? And you have good experience at multiple different levels, so I'm sure you see how it all intertwines, which is why it made sense to take on this new role. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Give us the layout of that. I'm curious how the flows of capital move around and what that looks like from a bid to who's paying it to how you guys are getting paid to XYZ.
Yeah, no, that's a great question because it's a very interesting business model. So we as a sports commission we're a not-for-profit organization that relies on the generosity of our corporate community. We run about a $4 million core budget. That's our staff, our office, those type of things. And that's what we work on to go out and do our mission. And so we have to fundraise that from our corporate community and from grants and other things like that. And we've been luckily here in Indianapolis, our corporate community believes in us. They believe in the sports mission. So they have funded us every year since 1979. And we've grown our staff since then, since 1979. We are the biggest sports commission in the country. So, and so we rely on that. The events themselves, they all kind of have unique bidding relationships and financial deals. So, but many times, most of the times, we don't get any of the revenue from the event. That the rights holders or the national governing body gets all that money from those events. So we have to either fundraise for the fees for the stuff that we need. So when we go into a bid, sometimes depending on how much the bid will cost, but bids will range anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 to put together. So we either take that from what our funds are, and we have some money set aside every year to bid on these events, or we'll actually go out and fundraise for it if it's a bigger event, like when you're doing a Super Bowl bid or something like that. You'll actually go out and fundraise for that. And then when you look at these events, so like Final Four, you have to fundraise for what they'll lay out what you need to pay for. Well, you have to go to the corporate community and to your benefactors and say, hey, we need money to raise to put this event on in Indianapolis. And there isn't necessarily there's not going to be, you're not going to get advertising because they have their own sponsorships and things like that. They're doing it because they see it for the benefit of the community. And so, but the money from the event itself all stays with the NCAA, or it stays with the NFL, or it stays with, when we did college football playoff, it stays with college football playoff. So it is an interesting model because, a lot of times when we host events, we'll actually lose money on the events. We will pay a rights fee. When we hosted when we hosted swimming trials, we paid USA Swimming for the right to host that event. Now, the event itself was a joint venture between us and USA Swimming, and the event revenues paid for the expenses, and then that's how that was paid for. But that rights fee we had to come up with as a community. It wasn't part of the event. So when you're thinking about that, you have to find from your community has to come together. So when you're thinking about bids and you're thinking about events, you can't have too many of them in a row that are big fundraising opportunities because you're going to tap your corporate community at some point. And so you have to really think about, as you're bidding on these events, can we afford, is it the right time to do this? Because if we've just hosted the NBA All-Star, is it right for us to go after this event and have to fundraise for that? And so you have to strike this balance, and then you don't want to pass on them too many times because you never know when they're going to come back around and when you have that opportunity.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. So basically it flows from outside, we'll just call it more like fundraise money, to ISC, to bid, to the NCAA, the NBA, whoever, and then they take their profits from the hosting event. But essentially that gap is that the city's going to benefit from it so much,
right,
from people coming to travel and stay at hotels and eat food, that's where sort of it goes full circle.
100%. And we also evaluate not only the money that is spent in the hotels and restaurants and rental car and all that stuff, which is very important to our industry. And we have a very robust tourism industry here in Indianapolis that is supported that way. But we also look at how is our media attention for the city? Like trials, we had 9 nights of primetime coverage on NBC. That's all that time coming in and out of commercial breaks, showing the downtown, talking about Indianapolis. And then we also weigh, and we can't necessarily put a dollar value on this, but there is a civic pride piece for people to be a part of something bigger than themselves, to be prideful of living in Indianapolis and being prideful of living in Indiana. When they go travel, they talk about how great it is. Those are some pieces that also go into the calculus when we're thinking about these events.
Yeah, very cool. And then I'm just looking at some data that your team sent over. So we'll just go most recent NBA All-Star 2024. It seems like what this is saying is a $290 million economic impact. How are you guys evaluating that? What's really going into that data where you can say, okay, here's what it is, and then obviously that's it's part of your pitch or storytelling, I'm sure, to make sure for, what'd you say, 2026 now you have it
Yep.
again. It's like, hey, look what basketball did in pro. Well, here's what it's going to do in college, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So what we do is we actually hire a firm to help us do a study, and they will actually take what is spent and they look at the hotel pickup, they look at the hotel rates, they look at the tax, that filings, and they'll actually the events are all kind of weighted differently. So like an NBA All-Star game, people will tend to spend more. They have expense accounts. They're there for business. They're there for those, rather than you might have a Olympic swimming trials. There isn't as much corporate in that. So that money isn't the same. So they're actually, you weigh that and you actually say, okay, the amount of money that these people are going to spend is higher than what it is for the Olympic swimming trials. So that goes into the calculus. And so you actually weigh all the money and you put it into a calculator. And then there's actually an algorithm that spits out how much money that's going to generate based upon the taxes, based upon the wages that it feeds for people that are working, based upon, if there was ticket tax or not, if there is, like when we did the Olympic swing trials, it was expensive to build the swimming pool. Well, that money is being spent, some local, some not. And it actually goes into the calculus. How much money is going out of the market? How much money is staying in the market? So the more you have local vendors and you actually put that in the report and actually calculate that, the more that money is meaningful and it means more. So that's how you create those economic impact. And so they are very detailed. They are very defendable. They use calculators that are used throughout the industry across the country. They've been looked at, they've been studied. And so it actually does generate that type of economic impact in terms of what it means to the state, what it means to the city, what it means to individuals. And then you're right, we use those figures when we start to think about other events. What do we think this event's going to do compared to these other events, and how does that play into whether it's worth it or not to spend the resources on going after an event?
Yeah. So the state of Indiana essentially loves you guys because you do a lot of good things for it. Are any of those reports from the past public available? Like, can you ever read these? I'd be fascinated to dive into one at some point, or is it all kept private?
Different levels depending on the events and the rights holders. I think I know we have released portions of the studies at different times. In the public, and it all kinds of depends on what we're actually studying, what we're actually looking at, and what the rights holder is also comfortable sharing with too.
Of course. Very cool. I'll leave you, or last thing, I know we've touched on a few things, so I want to try to cover them so we don't go in a circle, but you had talked about some of the emerging sports, multi-use facilities, World Cup, Olympics. Where are you looking ahead to? What do you find interesting? What trends are grasping, your eye of like, hey, here's where it could be beyond as we look for bids 3, 4, 5 years from now?
Yeah, we actually here really started to think about what the next 25 years of a sports strategy in Indiana could look like. And we really felt like there was, to become the global epicenter of sport, we felt like there were 5 pillars that we had to focus on, and to take us beyond just economic impact to economic development. So we're thinking longer term now. How do we take someone who is visiting, turn them into a fan, have them move here, have them open a business here, have them grow a family here, have them spend their wealth here? And so it's not just about the hotel night. It's actually about how do we create this long-term economic development. So we are thinking about events, of course. We're not going to go away from that. we are thinking about sports tech. You mentioned sports tech, the Techstars. That actually is, we're a part of that accelerator. We invest in that. We are mentors to those companies. We've used some of those companies for our events and our products. But we have a not-for-profit that we created with the state of Indiana called Sports Tech HQ, and they wake up every morning thinking about what businesses can we drive to Indiana that are in the sports tech space. We're thinking about education, sports education and academia, like sports law, sports medicine, sports management, sports accounting. How do we think about that? And we're also thinking about sports leadership. What other businesses and what other national governing bodies besides just the NCAA could be here and would love to coalesce with other organizations and share talent, share best practices and research and thought leadership. And so how do we create them and bring them here? And then finally, we believe that women's sports is not just a moment, it's a movement. And we believe that we can capitalize on it. We've been doing it for years. The Fever have been around for a very long time. They were one of the first WNBA teams. We've had women executives leading our biggest events, leading our biggest organizations. And we've had 23 times we've hosted the women's Big Ten basketball tournament. And so we've been doing it for a long time. So we believe that women's sports is something to lean into. So we're thinking about those 5 pillars as our strategy, and that's how we're going to go and keep leaning into our sports strategy into the future and make Indiana continue to be the place to have sports and become the global epicenter of sports.
Love that. Yeah, in 25 years, it's crazy to say it'll be 2050. Like it's the same amount of time frame, basically the 2000s.
I know.
Nuts, but yeah. Anyway, sports and just the world in general being a cool place then, most likely. What where can people learn more and visit websites, socials? Where are you guys active on?
Yeah, indianasportscorp.org is the best place to go to pick us up on the website. And then we have our socials there that you can link to. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can learn about our events. We have a mini documentary about how we hosted the Olympic swimming trials on the website. We also have a documentary about hosting 2021 March Madness when the whole tournament was in Indianapolis on our website that people can watch. So some great content that you can check out and be a part of, and we're really excited. So definitely go over there and check those things out.
Very cool. And then what's the next event that people should circle on their calendar?
Well, we have the next big event that will be kicking off is WWE Royal Rumble in February. And then we have the Final Four in April of 2026. And that'll be our next big events that we're really looking forward to. And of course, I guess we just won the WNBA All-Star Game for July of 2025. So people should circle that one too. So we've got 3 big events coming up in the next 18 months. So we're really excited about that.
Love that. Yeah, that's a good mix of some different things there
It
too.
is.
Well, yeah, Patrick, appreciate you coming on today. This was awesome. Got exactly what I wanted to know out of it, and it was unique. And I think there's a lot of good tidbits and points for people just to better understand just how massive and nuanced sports can really be, as you've seen from multiple different properties and countries and states you've worked in.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate everything you're doing for sports to get the word out there to influence people and tell them what's going on.